So hello, I'm on the couch with Jem Southam, one of Britain's finest landscape photographers. I'm just going to ask him a few questions. So Jem, when you get involved in a project, you tend to find one place and really explore it and follow it through. Can you tell us a bit about this process you go through when you involve yourself in one particular part of the landscape?
Well, what I've learned as I sort of work through my life is that the process of developing a piece of work is actually led by the place itself. In other words, there's something about a particular place which sort of makes me want to stop to take a picture. And having done that once, for some reason or other, I start sometimes returning. And if I return and I make a second picture, then I think I've got the possibility of building a piece of work here. And so the process always starts by action. There's no deliberation saying I will go and do something or other. So the docks pictures, which I started in Bristol many years ago, I looked out the window of my office at Arnolfini and saw a building being knocked down across the road and picked up my MPP camera and went round and took a picture of it. And then thought, well, there are more pictures to photograph here. And so once the ball's rolling, the fascination then is, okay, well, what's this work going to be about? Because I have absolutely no idea. And the process of developing a relationship with the site leads that story. And then the next and final thing is, okay, well, how am I going to shape a piece of work out of this? And I love the process of using my imagination and this process of working with a particular site to sort of orchestrate a different structure, a different set of ideas into a body of work.
And how do you know when that body of work is finished?
Well, that's an interesting one, because what I found out is that they don't finish. So that, for instance, when I finished the docks pictures, so I photographed the docks between about 1977 and about 1982-83, and I thought, right, that's done because the docks are being redeveloped and so on. 15 years, 20 years later, someone invited me to come back. And I came back and I started making some more pictures when I finished the Red River. I finished that because I sort of, the idea that I had been kind of developed as fully as I sort of needed to make a piece of work. I had a chat with Rosie Greenlees at the gallery at Plymouth Arts Centre. She was going to commit to the work. We had a deadline, so that then sort of brings the work to fruition. I walked away from that show and I'm still photographing in the Red River. And I'm making a new book with a lot of those pictures in the next sort of 6 months. So the only place I've actually ever sort of stopped working is the pond at Upton Pine. And that was because I sort of had a slight falling out with some of the people there. Stopped going. So it's fascinating because they always extend. They keep the relationship never seems to stop. So I'm still photographing the same rock falls. I'm still going back occasionally to do the rock falls. The River Winter I thought that was done. I did another 4 winters on the same sites there. So these things just go on and on and on.
So with the exception of the Bristol dock pictures, all your pictures are in colour.
Yeah.
So you must have started shooting these in colour before colour was the accepted thing that it is now. What made you think that it was so important to move from black and white to colour?
Well, going back, when I left college, I started working in colour in 1972. And I started shooting 5:4 colour transparencies. And I started a piece of work in some woods near Bristol where I was living. And I didn't like the colour. I didn't like what the transparencies were giving me. And so I kind of stopped working in colour and I started working in black and white. I knew from when I was at college I wanted to be a colour landscape photographer. But I couldn't realise what I wanted in terms of the sort of the palette. And then through working at Arnolfini, through looking at the books that Paul Graham was bringing into the bookshop and starting to see Stephen Shaw and Eggleston's work reproduced in books, I realised, wait a minute, that palette, those opportunities are now open. And so I started working in colour, I don't know, about 1980.
And was the shift then from transparency to negative quite a significant one?
Huge, yeah, because I suddenly, as soon as I started working on with negative, I realised that I could orchestrate the palette, the colour sort of relationships that I wanted to. The saturation that I was getting from transparency was and I didn't know how to print them, wasn't something I found at all, so I'd abandoned it. But the move to black and white to colour was fascinating because I was working on the doc pictures at the time, and I started knowing that I wanted to try and work in colour, and I would go out and I'd shoot a picture, the same picture on black and white negative and on colour, and I would look at these two prints and sort of try and work out, well, which one worked better. And one day I would look at the black and white prints and it has to be black and white, and the next day I'd look at the colour and say, oh, look what colour brings to it. And after about 6 months, I was going crazy. So I said, right, I'm going to stop working in black and white, and I've never taken a black and white picture since.
And
colour.
We have to remember that back in the 70s and 80s, working in colour was still very unusual. Knowing that Paul was also based in Bristol, and you were here, I think Peter Fraser too, do you think that Bristol in the 80s, I guess it was a real sort of hotspot of the development of the colour British photography movement?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't the narrative is slightly different from what you're suggesting. So, as you know, a friend and I set up this gallery in Clifton, and
what was it called?
The Photographers Above the Rainbow. And suddenly, going from not knowing anybody, photographers began to sort of come out the woodwork and sort of come to sort of look at the rather wacky exhibitions we used to put on. Then they started saying, could we use your darkroom? So we built a sort of this community darkroom. And then one day this curly-haired guy turned up and said he was called Paul Graham, and could he be interested? He wanted to work in colour. And he just was about to have a show. He just had his first show at Arnold Feeney of the transparency pictures of fish and chip shops. And do you know those pictures?
No.
You don't know Paul's early colour work?
Well, I thought I did.
No. He shot on 35mm transparency, and he had a show at Arnold Feeney they were insides of fish and chip shops.
Really?
Yeah. A lot of them shot in Bristol.
Wow.
Ask him about those.
Did not know that.
And so he brought his Dick Tank Proco kind of colour darkroom. I started using it, and a couple of others started using it. And then Watershed, around 1982-83, opened up in, was it Eshed or whatever it is, down on the quay, and they had a colour darkroom. They had a photographic exhibition program organised by Debbie Ely, and so around between the Photographers Gallery and the Rainbow, you had about sort of 6, 8, 7, 10 young people working in colour, and lots of the exhibitions that Debbie was putting on included those. You were in some of those, and so Bristol was I would say at the centre. I mean, we were aware of, was it Tom Phillips up in Yorkshire, but nobody else was making colour prints.
At that point, you could count the colour photographers on your hand.
Yeah, and
were you aware of Peter Mitchell?
No. Oh yes, of course I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I saw Peter Mitchell's
New Reputation.
Yeah. No, I didn't see it. I saw the publicity for it.
Yeah.
And that cover, and as soon as I saw that, I thought, hey, wait a minute, I want to see this work, and I never did, because travelling crazy between Bristol and
York.
Impressions and York and so on was we didn't have the money to do it and stuff. No. So and I always kind of wondered until 10, 15 years ago, what happened to him and his work? Now we know. And yeah, fantastic. So, I'd seen that work because it must have been in Creative Camera.
So that was 79.
Okay.
Do you think Paul's Arnold Feeney show was at the same time or after, before that?
Probably after.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you. I don't know. It was around the same, 79, 80. He was living in Bristol, working on, as I said, on 35mm. He'd obviously seen Eggleston's pictures. He'd made this series of pictures of, my memory is of the interiors of fish and chip shops and cafes, mostly around sort of Bristol, West Country. And interestingly enough, you know who had a show on at the same time?
Louis Boltz.
Gary Fabian Miller.
Really?
Paul and Gary Fabian Miller showed together at Arnold Feeney. And Gary had his pictures of the surface of the ponds, his surface of the ponds, duckweed pictures.
Right. Didn't know that either.
Or no, maybe they were the pictures of the sea from that house that he lived on. You know those pictures of maybe
Yeah.
that's what he showed. Yeah. So there was this show of Young British Colour. I didn't call it that. And I have at home a copy of the Arnold Feenley Publicity, which I used to produce. I was the sort of designer and design assistant, of that. And the thing that's extraordinary is reading the. I haven't got the nerve to send it to them. Reading the text that they wrote about their two shows, extraordinarily sort of naive.
Can you do me a photocopy? I'd love to have that.
If I can find it, yeah. But I mean, I almost it'd be embarrassing to kind of present it to both.
Oh no, it's in the public domain.
Yeah, I know. 22, 23-year-old guys sort of talking about their first work and so on. It's absolutely extraordinary language.
You've done this series about the Swans, looking at a particular point of the river, and for the first time you've gone to digital. So this is very unusual, given that your association with analog 5:4 photography is very strong. What made you think about going to digital?
Number of things. One was I always hoped I'd be able to see out my life working with film, but things have happened faster than that. One is I can't print my film pictures anymore because the papers. I can't print analog anymore successfully because the papers just don't deliver what's on my negatives. So that's one thing. Secondly, I teach, and most of the students are working digitally, and I felt I really had to have some experience about what it was doing. But third, I thought, well, I'm just being kind of crazy, just turning my back on something. I'd seen you working digitally, I'd seen Peter Fraser working digitally, Paul's working digitally. I thought, well, let's see what can happen. So I bought a couple of cameras and started just sort of trying to seeing what they offered. And it took me about 2 or 3 years to sort of learn how to work the technology. And I didn't want to sort of change where I went particularly, but I didn't want to try and make pictures that looked anything like the pictures that I made before. Because of the accident I was telling you about where I bust my arm, I had to start photographing one-handed, which made me work in a different way. So within about 2 or 3 years of starting to work digitally, I realised that the cameras are extraordinary, and they opened up a fantastic set of opportunities about making pictures in ways that I'd never been able to work with in film. And although I haven't abandoned film, I haven't shot a piece of film, I haven't shot a 10:8 neg now in 18 months. I've got a fridge full of 10:8 film at home.
So do you feel you've had the classic digital conversion?
Oh yeah, more than that. I mean, I'm complete. Having said that, I had last year I had a very small room of work in an exhibition at Hestercombe in Somerset. And on one wall I put 2 or 3 large prints from sort of 10:8, and on the other wall I put 3 of the small Swan pictures. And when I walked into the room and I turned to my right and I looked at the Swan pictures, I was more than thrilled by what I saw. When I turned round and looked at the 10:8 pictures, I realised that actually what they embody is something that I can never touch with a digital camera, which is incredibly kind of exciting. So somehow or other I want to try and keep both things going, but at the moment the working digitally is I mean, you can just imagine, Martin, working with a 10:8 camera, a busy year I'd make 50 negs, so I'd take 50 photographs in a year. With my digital camera I go out and I make 50 pictures in a morning, 50 exposures in a morning.
And you're pushing the technology because you're shooting on very high ISO.
Yeah.
I guess you have to do that because what you're seeing is so dimly lit.
Yeah. I don't know why, it's rather perverse, but I go out in the dark in the morning and watch dawn come up and make pictures, and gradually the ISO goes down until about 15 minutes before the sun comes up, and then I go home and have breakfast, and then in the evening I go after sunset. There's something about the muted light in those conditions, that also what's happening on the river, which just is I've got a couple of other series which I haven't shown you of pictures that I've also done in the same place, different things on the river, and the palette, the colours are just extraordinary. But I'm actually pushing the camera further than I'm getting noise, which is actually becoming part of I'm pushing the camera further than they're really designed to go. But
So the noise you're getting is almost being incorporated into
Yeah,
the
it
pictures.
is. It's part. Sometimes it actually sort of disturbs. There, I lost about half all the pictures I shot in that Swan series because the noise is just too much. But I'm integrating it into the pictures.
Thank you, Jem.
Pleasure.
That was
It's been
very
great.
interesting.
Thank you for the
Great.
conversation. It's good.